Beowulf, A New Telling by Robert Nye. Chapter 3. 10 Against Grendel. "It's like a slaughterhouse," said Hrothgar. He had got over his despair. His eyes were angry, and his mouth was set in a tight, grim line as he watched the servants mopping and scrubbing the blood from the ivory hall. His wife, Waltheo, laid her hand on his arm. "Husband," she said simply, "who can have done this terrible thing?" "I don't know," admitted Hrothgar, "but when I find the culprits, I shall make them pay for it with blood of their own." Unferth, the son of Ecglaf, was standing nearby. He was a rude and drunken fellow, always ready to argue, even with the king himself. "You'll never have revenge, great Hrothgar, mighty as you are," he said, rather sneeringly, in a hard, dull voice. "How's that?" demanded Hrothgar. Unferth shrugged. His shoulders were narrow, and he had a boil on his neck. He rubbed with his toe at a smudge of blood on the floor where he stood. "Because this was no mortal deed," he said. 30 men gone in a single night, and no trace of their having offered resistance. Well, it's obvious what happened. They were eaten." Waltheo gasped. "Eaten?" she exclaimed. Unferth nodded. A horrid little look of amusement hovered about his mouth. "That's right. Grendel was here." "I've never believed in Grendel," the queen said slowly. "It's just a tale to frighten children when they're naughty. If you're not good, Grendel will come and gobble you up. That's what my old nurse used to say." She shivered, half pleased by the memory. "Besides," she went on, "all those stories of Grendel are very old. Nobody believes in that kind of thing anymore." "I do," snapped Unferth. "Grendel is the wickedest fiend who ever crawled in darkness. He lives with the wolves and the mists. Some say that when Cain killed his brother Abel, he ran away on all fours, howling like a dog, and did not stop until he found a den at the end of the earth. And in that den, cast out and damned by God, Cain joined with a loathly snake, as black as jet, that drank the scum that comes on liquids bubbled up from the bowels of hell. One of their children had 3 heads, and vipers instead of fingers. Another was mouthed like a shark, but could fly through the air. The most hideous and evil of all was Grendel. The earth quaked at his birth, and stars pitched into the sea. He is made of hate, greedy for men's blood, the arch-enemy of all good things, the vilest—" "All right," said Hrothgar. "There's no need to sound as though you enjoy it so much." Unferth scratched his boil with a grimy fingernail. His eyes, small and malicious, fed on Queen Waltheo's fear. "Grendel did this," he said, with sinister softness, after a long, uneasy pause, during which the only sound came from the scrubbing brushes of the servants trying to clean the blood from the walls. "I know it." "I believe you do," Hrothgar said. "It takes an evil nose to smell the devil." Waltheo tossed her golden hair. She said, "If it is true, and there is such a wickedness at work in the night, then who can withstand it? The fiend must be angered by the shining hall you have built, husband. The happiness of the harp, the songs of the poets, the laughter of your warriors, all this must bruise his vicious heart." "That's right," sneered Unferth. "Grendel will be back, and next time it will be worse." He looked sideways as he spoke, as if fascinated by the prospect. Hrothgar nodded grimly. "Let him come," he said. "He will not be made welcome." "What will you do?" Waltheo asked. "I shall wait for him," promised Hrothgar, "this night and every night. I shall wait for him with the 9 lords who have the bravest hearts and the sharpest swords in this land of Danes. No child of Cain is going to ruin Hall Heorot." Unferth took a swig from his drinking horn. Aloud, he praised King Hrothgar's courage. Silently, he drank a toast to the demon Grendel. 9 warlords came at Hrothgar's call. They swore vengeance when they learned what had happened to the 30 warriors of the king's bodyguard. "It was because they slept," declared one. "Grendel shall not catch us unawares." All were keen that so terrible a deed should be swiftly avenged, and that no further disaster befall the great hall the king had built for them to feast in. Swords were honed, shields polished, helmets daubed with grease so that the monsters should not seize them easily to bite off their heads. Hrothgar himself wore a golden breastplate that shone in the least light. He was determined to meet Grendel face to face because of the insult to Heorot. Night fell. There was no moon, and the stars looked sparse and adrift in the punished sky. Queen Waltheo paced the corridors, wringing her white hands until the knuckle bones nearly pierced the delicate flesh. Unferth, drunk, his buckle belt undone, leaned from a turret to scan the murky marsh. Hrothgar and his lords waited in the banquet hall below. Food was set out, steaming on the tables, but nobody felt like eating it. The coming of Grendel was neither swift nor slow. This time, the night so thick, it was impossible to tell the precise moment when the creature emerged from his dreggy pool and began to drag his coils toward Hall Heorot. There was only the sound to go by, the foul breath squeaking in little gasps, the noise in his throat like the splintery crunching of bones. The rats could not see him and ran over his scales in the dark. Grendel let them go. He was hungry for more than rats. The door of the banqueting hall was thick and studded. Stout bars held it shut against the night's alarms. None of the 10 waiting warriors had slept a wink. Hrothgar's eyes never left the door. He sat bolt upright, sword in hand, a broadaxe at his side. The others were in similar attitudes. But they had no chance against the fury of the beast. One moment the door was standing. The next it was down, smashed by a single blow, and Grendel was upon them. Hrothgar was not able to remember rightly what happened then, nor exactly how he managed to escape with his life. The hall was a confusion of swords and blood, the brave lords hurling themselves at Grendel, and the fiend snatching them up in his claws and snapping their backs as if they were no more than toys. Man after man went into those terrible jaws, and still Grendel came on, unsatisfied, his green eyes glaring, his slimy skin not even scratched by the hacking axes. It was as if the night itself had poured into Hall Heorot, killing and eating mere men, the creatures of day. Torches went out as Grendel came past them. Soon the hall was pitch black, and the only sound the crunching and munching of bones and flesh. High above, Queen Waltheo began to scream and pray. Unferth had fainted, either from fear or excitement. A burning brand he had been holding in his hand rolled down the stair. The queen caught hold of it. The flame licked at her fingers. She cried out in agony and threw the thing down into the dark where the monster was. The brand missed Grendel, but it crashed to the floor beside the prostrate figure of Hrothgar, singeing his red hair where the great horned helmet had been knocked off. Perhaps this saved her husband's life. His golden breastplate shone like a holy light in all that dark. Even the baleful green of the monster's eyes seemed to dim before it. For whatever reason, Grendel hesitated a moment. Waltheo, seizing her chance, wanting to die with the man she loved, flew down the stair and flung herself on her husband's unconscious body. Her blue cloak covered him like a wing. Thinking him dead, she kissed him and moaned his name. "Hrothgar, my lord, my love, Hrothgar!" Then she fainted. When she woke, the king was still in her arms, badly wounded but alive. Her blue cloak was dark with his blood. She began to tear it up to bind his wounds. Unferth stood over them, holding the brand, with a tortured look in his eyes, as if it were his own hand burning.